A few weeks ago, I was sitting in a quiet cafe in a tech hub, and I saw something that really stuck with me. I was watching this young man at the next table.
Okay.
And he looked like the absolute personification of that China collapse narrative we keep hearing about. He was in his mid-20s, had a pristine master's degree in business management right there on the table, and he just looked exhausted.
Right, the classic image of the overeducated, underemployed youth.
Exactly. You'd expect him to be just, scrolling through job boards with this quiet desperation. But he wasn't. He was hunched over a tablet, intensely studying a technical schematic for a semiconductor assembly line.
Wow. It's not what you'd expect?
Not at all. So I struck up a conversation, and I was fully expecting to hear this lament about the 12.22 million graduate nightmare. But his reaction was so detached. He tapped his diploma and said, "The paper shuffling era is over." He said, "If I stay in soft services, I'm just civilizational entropy. I'm learning to actually build things because in 2025, that's the only way to remain relevant."
Civilizational entropy. That's a powerful phrase.
It was such a striking moment.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have all these Western headlines screaming about a 19% youth unemployment rate, this ticking time bomb. But on the other, you have this massive silent pivot happening where this tyranny of the mediocre is being dismantled in real time.
Right. We see a crisis of too few jobs, but the view from there seems to be a necessary pressure test.
A pressure test to purge invalid degrees and, get this, realign a workforce of 230 million flexible workers into a strategic reserve for the next industrial epoch. So is this the sound of a system failing, or is it a civilization forcefully reconfiguring its own DNA?
That is the central question.
We've been taught to see these numbers as decay, but what if that 4% fiscal deficit, what if the engineered dividend are actually the blueprints for a new kind of automation hegemony? Today, we're looking past the sensationalist autopsies to find the hardcore logic of survival hidden within China's 2025 labor market. Okay, let's unpack this. Our deep dive today is all about analyzing this shift, this forceful reconfiguration you're seeing in the labor market. We want to determine if the crisis headlines are actually obscuring a much larger strategic national project.
Right.
We need to go beyond just the surface statistics and really understand the integrated logic behind what feels like a tectonic movement.
That is precisely our mission. We're going to trace the strategic logic that's underpinning this dramatic pivot toward physical output and really technological self-reliance. It's a pivot designed to establish what you could call industrial sovereignty.
So where do we start? How do we break this down?
To really comprehend this immense directed transformation, we need to focus on three key interconnected components. First, the fundamental pivot of the national education system. We're talking about a state-led shift away from academic inflation and toward a manufacturing-centric model.
Okay, education first. Got it.
Second, we absolutely have to analyze the massive role of flexible employment. This isn't just the gig economy. It's a digital labor reserve that's being used as a strategic, high-elasticity reserve to maintain social resilience during this huge transition.
The shock absorber.
Exactly. And finally, we will examine the demographic catalyst. This isn't just a problem to be managed. It's being actively used to force an immediate, comprehensive push toward automation hegemony. This is a story of strategic necessity meeting industrial ambition.
Let's start right where the tension is highest, the labor market statistics. When we look at the headlines, the reality seems so stark. We've got a record 11.79 million college graduates expected to enter the market this year.
An unbelievable number.
And this is happening even after China showed this impressive capacity, creating 12.44 million new urban jobs just last year. Yet, we saw that peak youth unemployment rate for the 16 to 24 age bracket hit a really striking 21.3% last June.
And that was before they restructured the data.
Right. Even after they adjusted the methodology to exclude current college students, the rate was still high, around 14.9% late in the year. How can a system that's generating so many new jobs simultaneously struggle with such intense graduate unemployment? It feels like a fundamental breakdown.
Well, it feels like a breakdown only if you insist on viewing the economy through that, traditional lens of constant linear growth in the service and white-collar sectors.
So we need a new lens.
I think so. If we shift perspective, what we're truly witnessing is a targeted market correction, and on a historic scale. This is more than just a recession. It is a strategic pressure test, one that's seen as necessary to purge what the system had accumulated over 2 decades of just unprecedented academic expansion.
And what was that?
A massive surplus of graduates with what the system is now defining as invalid degrees.
Okay, invalid degrees, that's a strong term. What exactly does that encompass? Are we talking about degrees that are more theoretical than practical?
Precisely. During that rapid expansion period, universities just expanded their enrollment dramatically. And it was often in these, soft disciplines, general business administration, social sciences, media studies, generic law degrees.
The kind of degrees that were seen as a ticket to a white-collar life.
Exactly. They promised prestige. But many of them offered very limited practical technical skill or any capacity for physical output. This resulted in what we can call the tyranny of the mediocre, where the sheer volume of paper credentials just diluted the actual utility of a university education.
So, too many certificates, not enough skills.
That's the strategic view, yes. This mass accumulation of degrees without a corresponding skill set is creating what that student you met called civilizational entropy. You have human capital being misallocated and essentially canceling itself out in unproductive sectors. The system is now forcefully rejecting prestige that lacks practical application.
That reframing it's profound. So the crisis isn't one of a lack of economic activity per se, but it's a massive internal mismatch.
A huge mismatch.
You've got a workforce trained for a past era of, financialization and soft services, and it's now colliding head-on with the demands of an era focused on technological self-reliance and hard physical output.
Exactly. The system is forcefully realigning its human capital toward the hard, measurable demands of the real economy.
Right.
And this brings us directly to the most critical contradiction in the whole story. The talent gap.
The numbers here are they're truly striking.
Right.
While millions of humanities and business graduates are struggling to find work, the manufacturing sector is absolutely desperate for highly skilled labor.
Desperate is the right word.
The Human Resources and Social Security Ministry is forecasting that nearly 30 million jobs in manufacturing will go unfilled by 2025.
30 million. Let that number sink in.
It's an immense void. That's almost half of the entire industry's workforce needs.
And we have to be specific here. This deficit isn't for, old school assembly line workers performing repetitive tasks. Those roles are being automated away at an incredible speed.
So what are they looking for?
The shortage is acutely focused on specialized technical talent in strategically critical technological segments. Think AI engineers who can actually design industrial applications, experts in big data and machine learning, fabrication specialists for semiconductors, and researchers in emerging fields like quantum computing.
So if the soft degrees are being purged, the inverse of that has to be this engineer dividend you mentioned. What does that dividend truly signify? Is it just about getting a higher salary?
It's so much more than just salary. The engineer dividend is the rapid appreciation in strategic and social value for individuals who can master precision, fabrication, and production.
So their social status is actually changing.
Completely. These engineers are now considered the indispensable backbone of the National Strategic Growth Plan. Their value is non-negotiable because they are the bottleneck to achieving technological sovereignty. In this new environment, engineering expertise confers not just wealth, but genuine strategic social status. The system is actively cultivating this cohort, treating them as a strategic reserve vital for industrial growth.
Especially as geopolitical tensions kind of elevate the importance of having your own domestic technological control.
Absolutely. It's a national security issue now.
This realization that the engineer is now the primary strategic asset that's clearly driving a massive top-down response in the education system. Officials aren't just, hoping graduates pivot. They are actively steering them toward vocational and technical tracks to aggressively nurture this specific talent pool.
It is an aggressive, targeted overhaul. You can see it especially in the educational reforms enacted since the late 2010s. We're talking about a massive financial commitment. Post-2019, the central government designated 100 billion yuan.
100 billion.
Which is roughly 15 billion US dollars. Specifically to dramatically expand and upgrade the vocational training infrastructure across the entire country.
That funding is substantial, but how is it being implemented? I mean, how do you change the fundamental DNA of a university system that's been focused on academics for so long?
The change is both structural and philosophical. There's a strong, explicit directive to promote the transformation of some existing academic-focused universities into what are now designated vocational colleges or universities of applied science.
They're literally changing the names and the mandates.
They are. The core objective is a comprehensive shift from an academic-oriented model, focused on research and theory, to a pragmatic, application-oriented focus centered on immediate industrial utility. The goal is to legally stipulate and ensure that vocational education is seen as having absolutely equal importance to general academic education.
And what does that mean in practice?
It means strengthening the teacher workforce in technical areas, significantly increasing funding mechanisms for equipment and state-of-the-art training facilities, and ensuring the curriculum directly serves current industrial needs.
That push for equal standing seems essential if they want to overcome the societal bias that has, always favored the academic track over the vocational one.
It's the only way.
But for you listening, the structure of these vocational degrees can be confusing. Could you break down the specific educational pathways being used to funnel talent toward these critical industrial sectors?
Of course. And we should clarify these terms because they represent distinct, strategically designed pathways. The higher vocational education system really uses three primary tracks.
Okay.
First, you have what's called the higher vocational zwanke. These are short-cycle undergraduate programs.
Short cycle, so like 2 years.
Typically 2 or 3 years, yes. They're offered at specialized colleges, and they are designed to produce highly competent technicians very quickly. They lead directly to immediate skilled employment.
But is it a dead end?
Not at all, and this is key. They also offer a defined pathway to a bachelor upgrade program known as Zwanshengben, which allows the student to convert their specialized Zwange experience into a full degree.
I see. So there's an upward path. What's the second track?
The second, and this is a critical development since 2019, are the higher vocational Benki programs. Now, these are 4-year undergraduate programs offered by newly established vocational universities.
So a full bachelor's degree, but from a vocational university.
Exactly. And crucially, they culminate in that full bachelor's degree, granting the same academic standing and, importantly, access to postgraduate studies. This pathway completely dissolves that traditional wall between vocational training and elite academic attainment.
Wow. So they're ensuring that the engineering career path is not a dead end, but a dynamic ladder that can reach all the way up to a PhD if the student has the aptitude and desire.
Precisely. And the planning is integrated even earlier than that. Look at the combined programs, which really show a long-term strategy for cultivation.
What are those?
There are 5-year integrated programs that students can enter right after junior secondary school, so grade 9. These consist of 3 years of secondary level vocational study, immediately followed by 2 years of undergraduate level Zwanke study.
So they're identifying and nurturing this talent from as young as 14 or 15.
That's the idea. This integrated approach ensures technical aptitude is identified and cultivated from a young age, ensuring a steady, skilled flow directly into the workforce or into more advanced specialized education. It bypasses the previous pressure to pursue a purely academic 4-year degree that might just lead to that civilizational entropy we talked about.
It brings us right back to Chen, the master's student in literature from the cafe. He personifies the individual pain of this systemic pivot, but he also embodies the pragmatic logic of it. He chose to trade the prestige of his degree for intensive, high-end vocational training in precision CNC machining. What does his choice tell us about the current social contract in the labor market?
Chen's choice is a microeconomic sacrifice in service of a macroeconomic necessity. He realized that the intellectual currency he held, a master's in a soft skill, had been devalued by this market correction. By pivoting to precision CNC machining, he's pursuing what our sources call the sovereignty of physical output.
The sovereignty of physical output. I like that.
He's trading an abstract, crowded path for a difficult but strategically indispensable one. His move signals that in this new era, true upward mobility and relevance are achieved not through credential inflation, but through the mastery of hard technical skills that support industrial sovereignty. The system is successfully, if painfully, redirecting talent to where the national strategy demands it.
That redirection of formal academic talent is one half of the story. The other is this vast, fluid workforce operating entirely outside the traditional employment structure. Flexible labor. The scale here is just immense. We are talking about over 200 million Chinese workers in gig roles.
200 million, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
That's roughly 25% of the entire workforce. And it's projected to hit 40% by 2025. This isn't just a side hustle economy. This is a fundamental structure of the labor market itself.
And it's crucial here to understand the strategic definition of this workforce. When you look at it through a Western lens, 200 million gig workers immediately conjures images of, precarity, vulnerability, a lack of labor protections.
Right, instability.
But from the perspective of state strategy, this cohort is defined very differently. It's seen as a highly elastic strategic reserve. They represent social granularity, millions of adaptive units capable of shifting function very quickly, and they act as a powerful shock absorber in this context. How does that work in practice?
Well, imagine the current economic and trade restructuring. It's causing rapid obsolescence in certain traditional sectors and corporate downsizing in others. If those 200 million people were locked into rigid traditional employment contracts, any major structural shift would result in catastrophic, widespread, and prolonged unemployment and massive social instability.
Exactly. Instead, the gig economy provides immediate adaptive employment. It's a safety valve. As one factory closes or one company downsizes, those workers can almost instantly transition into high-demand roles like logistics, delivery, or digital content creation. It maintains an essential level of economic vitality. This ability to absorb massive shocks is a core strategic asset.
And this capacity wasn't just some happy accident. It was deliberately fueled by policy, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The acceleration of flexible labor was initially catalyzed by state policies, most notably the Internet Plus strategy introduced around 2015. That really incentivized the creation and expansion of digital platforms and logistics networks.
And then the pandemic put it to the test.
It was the ultimate stress test, and that foundation was proven during the COVID-19 pandemic. When traditional economic activity stalled, e-commerce and delivery platforms scaled up with incredible speed, becoming a vital lifeline for both consumers and displaced workers.
Can you give a specific example of that rapid scaling?
The numbers really illustrate the scale of this absorption capacity. Take Meituan, one of the dominant delivery platforms.
Wow.
They recruited an astonishing 458,000 new drivers between January and March of 2020 alone.
Well, in 3 months.
In just 90 days. That is nearly 500,000 workers absorbed into productive economic activity. It demonstrates a systemic capacity to convert rapid unemployment risk into high-elasticity economic activity almost overnight.
That immense capacity has to translate directly into economic muscle. How vast is the financial scale of this highly elastic reserve?
The gig economy's overall valuation is significant, to say the least. It reached an estimated value of 3.4 trillion yuan by 2020. But the infrastructure supporting core urban resilience, food delivery, logistics, microservices is even more telling. The food delivery market alone doubled in size to 1.5 trillion yuan by 2024.
And that kind of market dominance is only possible because of the underlying infrastructure.
You're exactly right. It's only possible because of China's advanced digital infrastructure. Seamless mobile payment systems, high-speed logistics tracking, dense network penetration. These factors allow millions of workers to flow instantaneously and efficiently to meet demand peaks, and that underpins this adaptive vitality.
I want to circle back to the anecdote of Meiling, the former marketing executive. Her story, pivoting from a stable white-collar job to this digitally mediated existence, illustrates this mobility perfectly.
Meiling's trajectory is a hallmark of this strategic reserve's intellectual adaptability. Her traditional marketing job dissolved. It was a casualty of the structural changes in the soft services sector we've been talking about.
Right.
So instead of facing prolonged unemployment, she transformed herself into what you could call a mobile unit of economic energy. Her day is intentionally fragmented. She spends her mornings performing data labeling tasks, which is a crucial high-tech input function for a local autonomous driving startup.
So she's still in the tech ecosystem, just in a different role.
In a very different, very flexible role. Then in the afternoons, she runs a niche live stream channel selling specialty teas. She's utilizing the available digital platforms to monetize both cognitive high-tech tasks and entrepreneurial retail. She is not waiting for a single stable job to appear. She's creating a personalized economic portfolio that utilizes the highly elastic nature of the digital labor market to remain productive and resilient.
It's an incredible illustration of entrepreneurial adaptation. But let's look at the demand side. With 200 million people supplying this labor, who is driving this demand and how deeply integrated is it into the core economy?
The demand is colossal, and it's deeply rooted in the urban working professional class. The food delivery market, valued at over $37 billion, serves an estimated 355 million users.
355 million.
And we see a significant shift in user demographics. Historically, 5 or 10 years ago, students were a huge percentage of users. Today, 83% of users are white-collar professionals, only about 10% are students.
So this confirms that these digital services are not just a youth trend. They're an essential, normalized service for the working professional class.
Exactly. And when you look at the frequency of use, you realize this isn't about occasional convenience. It actually dictates the rhythms of urban life.
How so?
Well, the largest user base falls within that highly productive 25-29 age bracket. They rely heavily on convenience due to busy lifestyles and sufficient disposable income. But the frequency is the key metric of integration. The sources show that 33.7% of users order food 3 to 5 times a week.
Wow, so almost every workday.
Almost every workday for a third of the users. And another 32.4% order 1 to 2 times a week. That means 2/3 of the entire user base relies on these services multiple times a week.
That kind of high-frequency integration has to have fundamental implications for how cities even function.
It does. It means urban planners and infrastructure managers must now account for this massive, rapid transit logistics system operating on their streets. It confirms that the flexible labor reserve is no longer peripheral. It is a fundamental engine maintaining urban economic functionality and productivity for the high-value white-collar workforce.
We've discussed the intense focus on re-engineering the talent pool and the role of the flexible labor force as a shock absorber. Now we have to turn to the relentless, non-negotiable long-term force that's driving all these changes. Demographics. The numbers are clear. An aging population, a high 22.8% old age dependency ratio. These are often cited as the biggest challenges China faces.
And that is the conventional, deficit-based framing. But strategically, we have to flip the narrative. The demographic shift is being viewed not as some inevitable decay, but as the decisive catalyst compelling rapid technological upgrades.
So the problem is actually the solution.
In a way, yes. When that traditional cheap labor pool disappears, the pressure to dominate automation becomes existential. It's the only viable path to sustaining economic output and ensuring civilizational stability. This scarcity forces the system to leapfrog into sophisticated technology, converting a long-term economic challenge into a strategic opportunity for global industrial dominance.
This pressure translates into real-world change on the factory floor. I'm thinking the story of Lao Wu, the textile plant owner.
Lao Wu's experience, it's typical of manufacturers in the Pearl River Delta, and it perfectly illustrates this forced upgrade. He reached a breaking point. The traditional flow of young, inexpensive manual labor from the countryside just vanished.
So what did he do?
The solution wasn't to endlessly search for unattainable workers. It was to make a fundamental, state-supported commitment to AI automation. His textile floor is now characterized by what he calls a silent dance of robotic arms. This pressure, this demographic squeeze, is effectively accelerating the end of the traditional low-margin sweatshop era.
So necessity is the mother of invention, or, in this case, automation.
Precisely. The necessity of maintaining output with fewer people is forging a more sophisticated, stable industrial infrastructure reliant on state-of-the-art technology. The robots, as he observed, are the key to his long-term stability and actually to higher quality production.
And this immediate push for automation dominance is taking a very specific, very ambitious form in hardware. The race for global leadership in humanoid robotics.
Indeed. Humanoid robots are really the ultimate expression of the demographic solution. These are defined as general-purpose, bipedal robots that can work alongside humans. They're designed for manufacturing, for sophisticated service roles, and eventually for healthcare.
And China has signaled it wants to lead this field.
It has clearly signaled its intent to lead the global production, deployment, and export of these devices. This dominance is not speculative. It's supported by comprehensive, long-term industrial planning and massive investment. The strategic goal is immense. Some speculative forecasts suggest the system could eventually deploy approximately 300 million humanoid robots to compensate for the anticipated demographic decline.
300 million robots. That is an astonishing projection of scale and technological ambition. What on earth makes this goal economically plausible?
The key is scale and existing industrial capacity. The cost structure is already falling rapidly. For instance, the Unitree Robotics R1 model is already purchasable for around $5,500.
Which is already much lower than I would have thought.
It is. And more critically, analysts predict that by the early 2030s, the average bill of materials costs for general-purpose humanoids will drop significantly, potentially landing somewhere between $13,000 and $17,000.
But who can build them at that scale?
That's the other crucial piece. The expertise required for mass production is being imported from the automotive sector. Companies known for their complex, high-volume assembly lines, like major automotive manufacturers, are entering the humanoid market. They're leveraging their established capabilities to achieve rapid cost reduction and high production volume. This combination of state imperative, technological maturity, and market-driven efficiency defines the strategic push for automation hegemony.
This level of directed, strategic industrial focus has to be centrally guided. This brings us back to the overarching economic blueprint, the dual circulation strategy, or DCS. Where does this focus on engineers and automation fit into that national mandate?
The entire transition is centrally enshrined within the dual circulation strategy. The DCS, which was formulated around 2020, is an explicit policy response to the increasing perception of a hostile external environment, particularly the escalating trade and technology competition we saw after 2018.
So it's a defensive strategy.
It's both defensive and offensive. The strategy explicitly prioritizes internal circulation, so self-sufficiency and domestic demand, while maintaining external links where they're beneficial. The core objective of the internal circulation is vertical integration, eliminating bottlenecks in production, reducing critical dependence on imports of high-end inputs, especially machinery and, of course, semiconductors. It is a comprehensive national-level hedge against external shocks.
So if DCS is the immediate policy, how does that translate into the longer-term vision for industrial upgrading?
The DCS is really the operational arm of the Made in China 2025 program, which aims for comprehensive technological upgrading. And this vision extends far into the future. The upcoming 15th five-year plan, scheduled for 2026 to 2030, is explicitly focused on building a contemporary industrial framework defined by sophisticated manufacturing prowess. This includes the concept of new quality production.
New quality production, what does that involve?
It involves accelerating the development of specialized clusters in strategic emerging industries.
And which industries are those? What are the key strategic sectors receiving this focus?
Well, they're the technologies that will define the next century. Quantum technology, advanced biomanufacturing, hydrogen and fusion energy development, sophisticated brain-computer interfaces, advanced robotics, what they call embedded intelligence, and the leading edge of 6G communications.
A comprehensive list.
And to ensure the success of this immense industrial framework, massive state investment and subsidies are channeled into securing and managing critical resources. Think lithium, cobalt, rare earths, and reliable energy supply. The goal is to eliminate any resource bottleneck that could compromise self-reliance.
That focus on self-reliance leads us directly to the most critical and, frankly, painful bottleneck China currently faces: semiconductors.
The Achilles heel.
Really is. Despite all this industrial strength, semiconductors remain China's #1 import item by value. It surpasses even oil imports. That single point of vulnerability is immense.
It is the single biggest threat to the goal of vertical integration and technological self-reliance, and it has triggered an unparalleled state response. This vulnerability is driving massive financial resources and policy incentives into domestic chip-making. The state-led solution is primarily channeled through the National Integrated Circuit Industry Investment Fund, known widely as the Big Fund.
Can you detail the scale and timeline of the big fund investments? The numbers must be huge.
The investment scale really demonstrates the seriousness of the commitment. Phase 1 of the Big Fund launched with 140 billion yuan, a massive initial injection. Phase 2, launched in 2019, committed an even larger sum, 204 billion yuan.
And where does that money go?
The fund's mandate is to act as patient capital. It's investing in every single stage of the domestic semiconductor supply chain, from equipment and materials to design and fabrication facilities. It is a sustained, strategic effort to overcome technical barriers that typically take decades to clear.
And beyond just throwing direct capital at the problem, what policy mechanisms are they using to accelerate domestic breakthroughs and maybe redirect capital away from less productive sectors?
They are utilizing powerful tax incentives designed to heavily subsidize the intense R&D required for chip making. The structure is fascinating.
How does it work?
Tax deductions are structured so that for every 1 million yuan, that's roughly $150,000 a company dedicates to R&D spending, they are allowed to deduct 2 million yuan from their taxable income.
A two-for-one deduction.
A two-for-one deduction. This extreme incentive framework encourages what we can call a forceful definancialization and rematerialization of capital. It redirects speculative funds and corporate profits away from short-term financial plays and toward the hard, patient, long-term work required for fundamental technological breakthroughs in this vital strategic sector. The national imperative is crystal clear. Achieve self-sufficiency in high-end technology to firewall the future economy from external shock.
So this deep dive has really revealed a systematic, integrated national project that's kind of disguised by all the crisis headlines. Let's try and synthesize these three big movements that are redefining China's economic DNA.
Let's do it.
First, we analyze the painful market clearing of soft degrees. This pressure test that forces talent back toward hard skills, manufacturing utility, and strategic STEM fields. The engineer dividend.
Right, a fundamental realignment of human capital.
Second, we examine that immense cohort of flexible labor, which acts as a powerful high-elasticity strategic reserve. It's utilizing advanced digital infrastructure to cushion the economy during this structural transition and maintain urban vitality.
The digital shock absorber in action.
And finally, we saw how the non-negotiable pressure of demographics is being utilized as a decisive catalyst to leapfrog into automation hegemony, all guided by the dual circulation strategy and unparalleled state investment in critical technologies like semiconductors and advanced robotics.
This systemic view is essential because it reveals the long-term focus on what you can only call civilizational continuity. While media attention focuses on short-term market volatility, the strategy is about building an industrial civilization that can sustain itself over the long haul.
And that continuity rests on two strategic pillars.
I'd say so. First, the willingness to leverage state capacity, which is demonstrated by the use of the 4% fiscal deficit to guarantee basic livelihoods and operations during this tough transition. And second, that intense, non-negotiable push for technological self-reliance and automation dominance.
It is an aggressive, difficult path. It forces massive changes upon individuals like Chen and Meiling, but the strategic logic seems clear. Ensure that collective resilience is maintained and that upward mobility is ultimately achieved not through paper prestige, but through mastering the critical industries of the future.
This large-scale structural adjustment is a necessary pivot toward a civilization sustained by physical output, technological mastery, and collective resilience, not by financial engineering or academic inflation. The data of 2025 is not an autopsy report for a dying system, but a baptismal record for a nascent industrial civilization that is prioritizing long-term collective continuity over short-term political or market volatility.